Stav, it's been about a couple months. Just be natural.
All right, man.
Just be natural. We don't, a lot of people on YouTube are fake. We just want to.
I want flex over here.
I don't even think this camera's working. It's been like, what, 2 months since we fired this thing up?
Yeah, it's 24 valve. Not used to getting
Oh,
fired.
yeah, all right. Don't even start. Hold on. Let me. Oh, bolts are stripped. Nah, they're all still stripped. But the light's on now.
Hello.
Do you think they can see us? Can we see them?
I don't know. Let's see.
I see a couple people back there.
Yep. See you on the couch over there watching us?
Yeah, 60 days since last turned on. This thing is so weird. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm George.
I'm Stav.
Today we're going to be talking about getting a built engine inside the RS3 as it now arrived a couple months late. All right, we were expecting this engine to come back a little bit while before so we can actually be racing at SoCal Euro. For those of you guys that attended, came over to 034's booth, here's a shot of it. Thank you guys so much. It was great to meet and see so many of you and have a great time. And of course, to be out there with our friends from SoCal Euro and 034 Motorsport. That being said, guys, it is time to get a built engine inside the VRS3. We're going to be doing the assembly and then this new build series kickoff for the RS3. Stav's going to be talking about some of the electronic mods. As you guys see, the engine bay looks a little different from when you guys last saw it.
Still silver.
But electronically, the car is changing. It's going to change. Stav's going to be remaking the harness, extending the actual Cyvex harness, and putting the ECU into the glove box. We've been talking about it for, I think, a better part of 7 or 8 months now, last few months now that we've gotten it running. But since now we're pushing towards this built engine, now it's time for Stav to take on that aspect and extend that harness, get it into the glove box, and we're going to talk about why. Also, the electronic modifications we had to some of the cooling, we'll talk about those and throughout this video and update you guys on where we're at. But super excited to kick off this build series. Super excited to start creating and making more YouTube videos for all of you guys. And you know what? Shout out to all you guys that have been supporting us on Instagram and on our Facebook. Those posts have absolutely just been going crazy. I mean, some of the posts we have on there is like 7,000 or 8,000 likes, a couple hundred comments. On the low side, it's about a couple thousand, which is still great. Guys, the support has been absolutely phenomenal. So again, we've taken a little bit of sabbatical for making YouTube videos. We took a little bit of a break.
On vacay.
Much needed, let me tell you, to kind of back away from social media, back away from the YouTube aspect, and just kind of hang out, enjoy the car for a little bit, and now come back fresh. I think pretty much every YouTuber out there, even some of the big famous ones, they do that too. They take a little bit of a break. You see them vanish for a few weeks. But guys, now that the cooler weather is here...
But even though we vanished from YouTube, we have made a lot of changes that we're going to show you today.
Correct. And Stav's going to talk about the electronic aspect. I'm going to talk about the mechanical aspect as far as some of the updates on some of the bay. And then we'll show you guys the built engine that came in, the configuration on it, and what our plans are moving forward as we kick off this build series. So without further ado, let's kick off. Let's talk about some of the details in the car. Let's showcase the built engine, some of the details on some of this car for the R30, some of the parts, showcase the color of the engine bay, which we kind of, well, I wouldn't really tease today on Instagram. We kind of actually posted the bottom end. It's full silver, but we'll show you guys what it looks like compared to the cast iron, what it looked like before. We'll do some before and after as this episode progresses.
Some people are going to say, though, it looked better before, but let's go.
Let's kick this off. A couple things. The machined engine, the R30 3.2 liter VR that has been machined, is now back, and we're going to talk about some of the details on both the cylinder head and also the bottom end. They're going to make this engine a little unique to us here in the States, and some of our original plans that we actually had to kind of shift away from and kind of improvise and kind of change on the fly. So let's start off with the bottom end. So this is a 3.2 liter VR6. As you can see, the top is O-ring. We did talk with the machinist about fire ringing. Unfortunately, once the engine got there, conversations for the firing didn't seem too, let's say, confident, okay? No one's ever fire ringed a cast iron VR6. And being that the machinist was so far away, all the way in New York, we're here in California, it seemed like he was a lot more comfortable doing the O-ring. It's also something that could be done by other machine shops versus a firing that no one's ever done, and we potentially could have issues. I think with the firing, we're going to end up leaving that for the billet engine next year. We'll talk about that later on in the video, but we did O-ring it with stainless steel wire going all the way around. The bore was brought out to 84.5. We did paint the block silver, of course, naturally.
Of course.
Naturally. And on top of that, with this engine, we also opted to go with a girdle, which we got from Turbo Impressions, that we had the machine shop kind of smoothing out and figured out. Because the girdle itself doesn't come as a perfect fit. It definitely needs a machinist to kind of adjust these spacers that press on these caps. So the machinist went through, machined the top of the main cap, make sure it was flat, ended up tweaking these spacers, and then making sure that this was completely flat on the bottom of the block. So the R30 block, this one here is technically ready to start assembling, which is pretty cool. We're going to talk about the head here for a second. So the head actually has a machine groove in place, and that's where the O-ring can kind of press the gasket into this groove. And we're going to be using a Copperhead gasket, not something that a lot of people use on daily driven setups, but on these water galleys, they use these ultra black oil. What was it? The oil, not the oil. The seal.
Yeah. So copper is not well known for handling coolant. It handles boost pressure very well, but oil and coolant it does not seal very well. So they tend to add a
little bit of sealant, right?
Yes, it's basically a silicone, but around each of the oil and coolant ports, and they put them on both sides of the head gasket to help seal the motor.
Now here's the thing, right? So while this car is daily driven, we want to make sure that the engine can be driven on the street. However, there's going to be a huge focus for us to go back to drag racing and having some fun and making some big power. So for the Copperhead gasket, which I don't have yet, it's actually still being made. I have like 2 or 3 of them that should be here in the next week or 2, and then we'll be able to slap the head on and you know, assemble the rest of the motor. But we wanted to discuss the O-ringing, the tech behind it, and the reasoning for it. There's going to be some high cylinder pressure inside this motor, guys. And we want to reduce our chances to having issues. A lot of guys are making big power on VR6s, and they're going, I don't know, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200. Some of them are not even O-ringed. And I'm not saying they're not having problems, but eventually after 15, 20, 30 passes down the track, you know, that head gasket, that sealing surface does get worn down, and they have to rebuild it, re-clean it, re-gasket it. So we're adding now this O-ring surface to compress the actual gasket around the O-ring, create a tighter seal, and then push itself into this groove to reduce our issues as far as the combustion chamber. And then we'll be adding a little bit of sealant around some of the coolant passages to make sure we don't have any coolant leaking.
The other thing that you should talk about, like, yeah, people, like for example, my failure with cylinder 1 that we did show, all we did was O-ring the head because it was cheaper and easier and faster to ship the head across. But since we have to ship the motor across the country, you decided to go with the O-ring on the bottom, and then on top of that, the O-ring groove on the top. But the other thing that you haven't spoken about is the large studs you put in here.
Correct. I actually did go with a 1/2-inch stud. A lot of people end up going with tooled steel, but unfortunately we couldn't get a 1/2-inch stud. The biggest they wanted to make was M12, which is still very big and very massive. Correct. But I wanted to go something with a little bit more grip, a little bit more actual size. So we went with 1/2-inch ARP studs that we sent out to the machine shop, and we actually had it machined in. And these things, let me tell you something, are fucking massive. Look at these things.
Well, the original is the 10mm stud, and 1/2-inch is basically 12.6. So you're almost over 2.5 millimeters bigger.
Correct.
In the stud.
I'll do a screenshot real quick so you guys can see the difference between the stock head stud and now this 1/2-inch.
You should do like this. Him and the guy she told you not to worry about.
I'll do the screenshot real quick so you guys can see the photo. Yeah. But yeah, that's basically the size that we're upgrading to. And the reason why we're going with a really fat head stud and O-ring is to make sure now that this head has a reduced possibility of lifting, especially with high cylinder pressure. We are going to be running nitrous on this car. There's going to be added cylinder pressure to the car. We want to make sure that while we're making big boost and racing and abusing the shit out of it, that we're reducing our chances. Now, you keep hearing me say reduce, right? There's no such thing as eliminate. As we are looking into a billet VR6 engine block later on for next year, when it becomes available. Right now, there's nothing available, and right now the only people testing and racing an actual billet block is Hubert and his team over at HST, and they just went, what, 7.8?
7.8 off the trailer first pass.
In their TT/TTRS modded front bumper car. I'm telling you guys, the billet stuff looks really exciting. So in the meantime, we're going to make as much jam with this cast iron VR6 block, and we're going to do all the tips and tricks that normally people do to try to keep this car together, keep the engine together, and keep making power. With that being said, we did make some modifications to the crank. So we are using a 12-valve, I repeat, a 12-valve crank. So Stav's really proud because now a 12-valve crank is actually going to be spinning and running.
Well, no, I'm just glad that you're finally going to have a car that's fast.
So we are using a 2.8 crank to de-stroke, smooth Stav, to de-stroke the actual 3.2. However, the 24-valve 2.8 and the 12-valve 2.8 are the identical crank. We just don't have any spare 24-valve motors.
That's arguable.
Yeah, we don't have any spare 24-valve motors to donate a crank from because I really haven't had a failure in my 2.8, and Stav's had a ton. So we got a bunch of 12 valves just kind of sitting around the shop.
Actually, it comes from my stock block that ran 35 psi. But no big deal. Keep going. Keep
so we did have the crank surface modified a little bit. We are going to be running a fluid dampener pulley, and it does come with one Woodruff key in the back, chuck, that goes into the back. Yeah, well, it's a Woodruff key, really. We actually had the machinist add a second one. Now, I don't foresee us having any issues. A lot of guys in overseas running this stuff without having any big problems, but this is going to be the highest horsepower setup.
And we've also been running it on our cars.
Yeah, I haven't.
We've also
when
been
we
running
say our, like
my car that has 27,000 miles, your car that's a jack staying queen, you know, like that. You know what I mean?
So overall, it's the second pin just to make sure that the pulley is properly secure. It doesn't spin on it. And again, it's just a small piece of added safety that we had the machinist add it to the crank. But we are going to be using a 2.8 crank in the 3.2 liter to de-stroke. The reason why you de-stroke is we want to be able to rev higher, make more power in the high RPM. I don't know if we're going to be sticking with the RS3 transmission for the entire life of the car. I mean, if we ever want to switch, now we have an engine that can make, boost, and operate pretty much in every RPM, especially 9 or 10,000. Some of these guys in Europe, they're claiming 9,800 RPM in some of these VR6s. So the R30 is just going to be a more, I guess the power bend is going to be where we need it, especially removing a little bit of the high-end torque from the bottom end and moving it towards the mid-range so we don't destroy transmissions and diffs, which is a killer of the RS3 DQ500 transmission and the transfer case and the driveline. So we're thinking that the R30 is going to be the right fit for this car. Quick shot of the actual bottom end. Nothing's installed, not even the crank's put in place, but this is the turbo impression steel plate girdle that HST used in their cast iron setup, and a lot of VR6 people use this overseas, making big power. Again, not a real big issue for the 2.8s, and some even people claim it's not an issue with the 3.2, but the guys in Europe are making so much power and racing and abusing, they're seeing basically the block flex. So flexing may cause a bearing to spin.
I mean, for example, this is a 2-bolt main, which is like a 90s and 80s design. Most new cars, I think even the Daza is a 4-bolt main because it has the side reinforcement. So all this is going to do is, tie everything in. So, when the mains are going like this, now you have a steel reinforcement here.
And we've never run an actual girdle before.
Never.
And to be honest with you, I made what, 750, 754 wheel on the 2.8 VR6. Could probably make a little bit more, but I didn't design it with the higher end tolerance. We didn't O-ring the block. We didn't do anything for higher cylinder pressures or even nitrous. And we figured if we're going to be shooting for power, we're going to be racing. The RS3, I mainly got it to go down the quarter mile, half mile, and have some fun. We figured, what the hell? And it was a small expense. We'll put this on the links, and yes, I'll actually put it on the links.
Yeah, you do that every time. Like, we put in the link, and then where's the link?
Yeah, I'll actually put Turbo Impression's website. They are overseas, so there might be a little bit small of a language barrier, but we have been communicating with him on Instagram, and he's been super solid, Marcus, over there.
Yeah, we got these in about 3 weeks from overseas. We can't even get parts from America in 3 weeks.
And then that's the killer, too, is like the guys in Europe, I can't say this as a blanket statement for all of them because I'm sure there's a few shitheads, but we're buying parts from Europe, and they're shipping and getting here in about a week and a half, and then we're buying parts from people here in the United States that can't ship in like months. So I got to give you guys over in Europe a huge shout out. Is the customer service. You guys barely even speak English, but you guys are supporting your customers in the United States, and we just want to say thank you for that, because to get shipping from Turbo Impressions or even Hubert when we bought the Cat Cams for this setup, this shipped on a Monday, arrived Thursday from Austria.
Yeah.
Came right off his shelf. So the guys over there are really cool.
And what some of the guys in Europe are claiming that they are running this this girdle is that when like the high horsepower 1300 horsepower cars, they were having bearing issues, oiling fluctuation at the high power levels. Once they installed the girdle, because now the mains aren't flexing, they're like, instead of replacing every race event set of bearings, they've gone seasons now on the same bearings.
I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out for us. Again, as amateur builders doing this stuff here in my home garage, kind of seeing how this technology ends up working out.
And of course, there's a lot of variation because the machining has to be correct, the tuning has to. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into everything. But if this could help us potentially stay with a cast motor for a longer period of time till the billet is proven, it's a cool setup for a couple $100.
Got it. All right, let's go on. Of course, we're going to be running like we teased at the beginning of this build series, where we were just, learning how to fabricate and learning how to put things together. We're going to be running the DP R30 rods along with their custom pistons, calico coated. main bearings and rod bearings we're going to be running as well. So everything we're going to have to do just like we did on my 2.8, just like we did on Stav's. So we're going to have to fit, file, and then finish the rings, and then install them onto the pistons, assemble them, and then drop them into the car. For those of you guys that may ask, I know there was a lot of people that reached out asking who was building our engine. Again, pretty much every engine we've built about 90% of the way through. The only thing that me and Stav have never done yet, and I don't think we're gonna, maybe we'll buy like a spare motor on stock valves and end up practicing, is lapping valves. No. So I've always been super nervous about lapping, especially expensive Ferrera valve train, you know, or even the Supertech stuff. This stuff gets super expensive. The kit itself, the retainers, the springs, all the parts, including the valves, was like $1,500.
The problem with lapping valves is, like, you know, we don't have the tools to actually vacuum test this after it's done. Some people have made some home shift remedies. And listen, you could do everything in the garage. Look, we've done everything here. But being able to lap a valve is pretty easy. But to be able to test to make sure that every valve is completely sealing and everything like that, some people do the brake cleaner test, you know, which is like a home remedy. I rather trust a machine shop to do, you know, the precision
Correct.
stuff, you know?
So I'd say about on the engine, as far as assembly and building, we got it covered about what, 90%? 90%. Maybe 85 if you want to say that the head work requires a little bit more effort. Mm-hmm. But we still have to install the lifters and the cams. The cams have been temporarily installed. I just ordered the lifters from Eurotuning. They should be here hopefully in a few days. Mm-hmm. So they'll arrive. We'll throw brand new lifters, reuse the arms, the roller arms, and then get the cams installed. And then basically the head is going to be waiting for the install, for us to just install the bottom end, which we'll do on the next video. But still waiting on that copper gasket to come in.
Correct.
There are 3 copper gaskets from a company called Cometic that the machine shop opted to use. And it seems the lead times are out for like 2 or 3 weeks. So a week and a half, about 2 weeks have passed. Hopefully we get this head gaskets, or 3 of them now in the next couple of weeks. If not, we have a couple of the companies here in California. I'll just have to call up the machine shop, see what specs they ordered the head gasket in, and then order the copper setup from them as well. Yeah, let's talk about the changes in the engine bay. I think that covers pretty much the billet engine, or not the billet, the machined engine, and what's going to be coming together. Man, I'm so excited for this stuff. We finally got it here. We finally got it. Mm-hmm. We finally got it. It's here.
Now half the battle's gone and the other half of the battle starts.
Yeah, correct. So let's talk about some of the changes in the engine bay, shall we? About the engine bay here, Stav's going to give us a rundown on some of the electronics that have changed and updated in the last couple months and what we've been working on and experimenting with. Stav?
Well, ever since we got the car running, I mean, the car's run fine. We got, you know, we tuned it. We did some setups on the ECU. We had a little bit of issue with the oil temp stuff because you were skyrocket 280-degree oil temps, which we ended up finding out that the base config file, there was a few mistakes made, and luckily now that we're able to get into Cyvex and we're messing around with it, and, you know, like you and I are messing on the SCAL, we learned that the calibration, now the car's reading 220-degree oil temps, so we're back to being good.
And then also a huge help from Ryan over at Cyvex for helping us with a lot of this config stuff and figuring out the coding. So Ryan, if you're watching this video, if you're not, hopefully someone will tell you. Just want to say thanks, bud, for helping us with pretty much everything from the beginning and working with Stav on the actual coding, getting things calibrated, and just figuring it out so this way this car runs like it should.
Correct, absolutely. I mean, some of the things that we have now advanced, we ended up going to some Spall fans. We removed the factory PWM fans.
Correct, and we also upgraded now the radiator too.
Yeah, you went to a 52-millimeter radiator, big boy radiator.
Which we're finding out is a bit too thick.
Well, we found out before. I told you it wasn't going to work.
I thought it was going to work.
The problem, and this is something we found with our B5s, is when if you're limited by fan and you go to a thicker radiator core, you don't have enough CFM pushing through the fan.
Correct,
so like now we're going to go to another B5 S4 radiator. We're going to go to a factory thickness CSF radiator, but it's obviously an upgraded core, and you're going to be able to weld on the AN fittings.
It's half the thickness of this aftermarket one that we had made for the B5, but it's also triple pass being half the thickness, which will allow us to run a little bit larger setup fan to run that higher CFM.
Correct.
Right now we have, I think, roughly 1,400 CFM on the front, 1,400 CFM in the back as a puller with Spall fans. Mm-hmm. Versus now the big boy fan that I have on the shelf, the Spall, which is the bigger motor, that's 2,400.
Correct.
So we're gonna have the room to run a little bit more. A little bit more fan.
Yeah, I mean, we're still testing the setup. You got to remember also that when George put an aftermarket oil cooler there, we ended up removing one of the extra radiators on the car.
Correct. Yeah. So now we have one less radiator on the car cooling the actual.
Correct.
coolant.
And then you have this giant boat anchor of a motor, 24 valve. heating up the motor. So I mean, heating up everything. So one of the things we're going to talk about, we are George wants the ECU in the glove box. So now we're going to remake the harness, and
let's show them the actual ECU. So in the 5-cylinder setup, even in the VR6, we pretty much left the ECU exactly where it was. In fact, with the 5-cylinder setup, the ECU was actually mounted really here, like right here. And that's where they had it mounted down to the little plastic mount here.
About 15 inches from your exhaust
manifold. Oh, dude, when it was superheating, we were having problems with the ECU, overheating, shutting down. Mind you, moving it about 10 inches here still, engulfs it in heat. And Cybex did upgrade the ECU with now
a newer board,
something that's able to handle heat better. I think it has upgraded heat sinks inside the circuit board.
And that's what's great about working with Cybex Direct. They're willing to work with us and address the problems. And now they've come out with remedies to fix it.
Well, not just that too, stuff. We're actually hearing what the actual issue is.
Correct.
And, instead of being middleman or being the last one to find out, now we contact them directly, talk with them, their teams, send them the ECU if we need to.
I think Ryan regrets giving me his number because 3 o'clock in the morning I'm messaging him.
So we actually have the Cybex EUC here, and what I want to do is, so I haven't had a problem with heat so far. Again, moved it about 10 inches, back over here seemed to have helped it. The giant 6-inch intake seems to be shielding the ECU, but inside the engine bay, it still gets very, very hot, which presents some potential problems. We live in an area where it comes up to about 115 to 110 degrees ambient heat.
Which you drove all summer.
Correct. And I didn't have an issue with the heat, but we also weren't making power. So we're throwing about 10 PSI at the car. But as far as shutdowns and the issues that we had before, those are pretty much gone. However, now that Stav's got a lot snazzier and a little bit more suave with the wiring, he's going to be relocating this ECU into my glove box, thus eliminating any potential heat issues ever in the futures, whatever temperatures, no matter what environment we're going to be racing in. And also, he's going to be freeing up this entire space. Now, as you guys remember, as we started to VR6 swap this car and started doing the wiring, we already eliminated one extra ECU expansion box because the 5-cylinder car had direct injection. So now we already have half the components in here, but I still want to clean it up and make more room. I'm thinking inside the glove box, should be nice. We'll make a little mount for it. Should be clean. It'll be easier accessible there, and it'll give me room here. And if you guys notice this little reservoir box, that's actually the brake reservoir. We deleted the OEM brake reservoir.
Is that from a motorcycle?
That's from a motorcycle. We did it from a Kawasaki. We ordered it on Amazon. And we drove all the way to SoCal. I drove all the way to San Diego on this brake reservoir because the 6-inch intake that we opted to go with, it just wouldn't clear it. In fact, even with a 5-inch pipe, it still became an issue. So we ended up taking a page out of a company overseas called Dutter Racing. They actually have a 5-cylinder RS3, and I saw a screenshot, a photo.
TTRS. I think it's TTRS, no?
I'm pretty sure it was a...
Oh, maybe
it's a... hold on, it might be their TTRS. And I'll show you guys a screenshot that I found on their Instagram. I'm like, if they're doing that, can we drive on it? So I was like, I think that's only for a race setup.
I think so too.
We drove all the way down to San Diego with this car.
105-degree weather?
All the way into Irwindale, about 100 degrees. No issue stopping, but again, not really going super fast as we're only throwing 10 PSI at the car. Anyway, long story short, we want to relocate this ECU inside the car. We want to make room here for whatever goodies are going to be coming, just to have extra components.
Let's be honest. You want to relocate the ECU, and now you're giving me more work to do. And then on top of that, you want to add things like fuel pumps in the back, surge tank, nitrous, turbo speed sensor.
We're running a surge tank, a radium surge tank, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. We're running a radium surge tank in pretty much all the B5s. You have pretty much a dual pump surge tank in your car. It only makes sense we run a surge tank here because the stock tank just really sucks. Before we get into that though, Stav, as far as now the changing, do you want to talk about now redoing the harness and why?
Okay, so when we originally made the harness, there's a section that we can't see now. We'd have to take the harness out for you to see it. We didn't eliminate some of the connectors because originally I never thought I'd be able to complete this. We did it, it was kind of on a whim. I was like, let's try it out, and then it started on the first try. So like we didn't use Raychem or any type of good heat shrink. We just put it together, ran it, just to not eliminate as many things as possible in case we may need it in the future.
I got Amazon wrap too that I wrapped there, so they see the somewhat quasi-professional job. It doesn't look that great.
No.
What Stav is trying to say, there's a lot of connectors there that the RS3 5-cylinder engine used because of all the electronics and all the extra plastic gizmos that are on it that we are not using with the VR6. So I have about 10 or 15 connectors that are bunched up in about a ball right in between the intercooler piping and the engine that we no longer need. So I ended up buying a spare Daza harness. Stav made a pledge that he was going to remake this entire harness, make it cleaner, leaner, get away like 70% of the leftover stuff that's not being used.
You gotta remember when we first made this harness, we had to download the Cyvex program because we didn't even know how to navigate. Now we know how to navigate it. Now we know this ECU works. The dash fully works. There's not an issue. Actually, you have less lights on the dash than you did when you had a 5-cylinder in the car. It's true. So like now that we know that it all works and we have the ability, let's go back and make this right, because now that you're putting a built motor and billet, it should have a wiring harness that matches it.
Yeah, 100%. So that aside, Stav, I did make some changes. I want to talk about some of the hardware. I kind of made a custom catch can here with two 16AN lines.
That's right, man.
Huge.
It's a good try, man.
I think it looks kind of cool. I think it looks all right. It looks pretty industrial, I guess. I don't know if I have to remake it or relocate it, but we ended up deleting the stock coolant bottle, and I ended up getting this little sucker and then modifying it, mounting it here in the back of the valve cover. I think it looks a lot cleaner and nicer. I am noticing, though, that the volume is really small. So we have a 20-pound cap on here. So it ends up pushing up the cap a little bit and squirting out a little bit of coolant. So I'm thinking of either going back to the OEM coolant, relocating this catch can and making two lines come around and making the catch can back here, or going with something a little bit more volume, maybe a larger canister, something a little bit beefier here, so when it expands, it doesn't push this cap open and spray.
Well, I told you what your original problem is. You filled it up to the tip, so it has nowhere to go. If you filled it halfway, we'd be good.
You think so?
I know so.
Oh, so maybe we could just leave it then. Or maybe I could just remake, Stop, you can CAD design.
Well, I told you we're gonna make one because
if you can,
because your engine bay looks really good, and like if someone stands like right here, like, hey man, what's going on? But like when they see this part,
hey man, this is a pretty good try. The red matches with the coil packs. What are you talking shit for?
Listen, it looks kind of hibiscus colors. I get what you're trying to do, but listen, we're trying to improve it, and the red matches your red in your 034 DSG catch can.
Okay, and I don't want to talk about the surge tank too much because I want to wait for that to actually come in. We can showcase them, but again, I'll screenshot the radium surge tank that we're using in our B5s, and the one that I just ordered, 3-pump surge tank from Radium. And again, a lot of the shops in the 5-cylinder world used to talk a lot of shit about the Radium surge tank. Surge tank will never work. The brushless in-tank pumps are the way. And now all these shops are actually utilizing the Radium surge tank and installing it for their customers. So it's kind of funny now. People are actually using the surge tank technology in the newer cars. Why? Because it's proven, it works, it's simple. And for a 3-pump setup, I think with shipping stuff, I was what, $1,100? $1,100 for a system that can support up to 1,600 horsepower.
The pumps you ordered 1,900 horsepower.
Was it 19? Well, crank. I figured wheel. I figured wheel. So let's say 1,800 crank, right? But who cares about crank horsepower or BHP base horsepower? 1,600 wheel for $1,100. Meanwhile, brushless system setups out there are, for the pump setup alone, $2,000 or $3,000 maybe. The
control is about $2,500, and the pumps are like $600-700. So you're looking at $4,500 to $5,000 for the whole setup.
And that's it's rough. $4,500 for a fuel tank that really doesn't support drag racing. You have to have half a tank or a little bit less than half a tank to be happy. And even if you get lower than that, it starts to bog out and starts to constrict. It doesn't feed, and then Cyvex or UCU starts cutting power. With the surge tank system, I'm just, I'm not going to even talk about it that much. I'm just so excited for when it arrives. That Stav's going to be wiring it up, setting it. We're going to talk about how we're going to be staging the pumps with Cyvex. That's going to be a completely separate video on its own. Fuck, it's 2 months worth. What is it? 2 months now worth of updates. We're trying to cram into this 12, 13-minute video, guys. But again, we're back. We wanted to talk about what came in, what we're excited about. Now with the cooler weather, it'd even be ready for some street draggy runs, which we're really excited about seeing what the car's going to do on the street.
And I'm sure a lot of people are tired too, because we post so many updates. People are like, "Hey man, when are you guys going to go drag racing?" Well, we needed a built motor to go drag racing.
That was the biggest struggle.
295,000 mile Touareg engine. It's not going to handle the power we want.
And mind you, a lot of people will not understand, and they don't, even for the normal 5-cylinder stuff, the kind of effort it takes to go racing or building something from home. So imagine now taking a literally brand new car, custom engine swapping this, custom wiring, custom tuning, custom making all the components like no one's ever seen before. This setup has never been seen before on any RS3 or TTRS, and we've done it here in my home garage. And to get it running, people again take years to get anything close to this, and we made this here with a Harbor Freight welder, a Harbor Freight TIG and MIG welder. We did it with the tools here. We designed and made the stuff here, and we got this car running and driving. And I drive this car to work pretty much every other day.
And it's not just running, George. It's also running well, because at the same time, listen, the first day we got it running, if we wanted to tune it, it would work great. Your dash had a bunch of lights because we had to code stuff in. If we wanted just to put a fast motor and go fast with, great. But we also want to drive this car to San Diego and make sure that it comes back, not on a tow truck. So there's a lot of development that goes into this to make this 100% correct.
So I guess, guys, in closing, we're back.
We're back.
Oh, and let's talk about stuff you built for a second. I know you put it on ice. Listen, not even talking shit.
Okay.
Not even talking shit.
All right.
I know you put things on ice to kind of help me with the RS3, and we focused on this car for what, 8 or 9 months straight. And even now, we're still focusing on the RS3 because the built engine just arrived. But as an update for Stav's car, as soon as we get the built motor in and we start getting development and start going a little bit, going fast, checking the car out, making sure we don't got to change anything, our attention is going to turn to Stav's car. We already started with the tubular manifold. We posted it on Instagram. We even posted a video here as we're doing fabrication.
But if we're going to give an update of some sort, like, at the same time, because of COVID and everything going on in the world, we ordered 625 rod bolts and some other bolts for my motor, December.
Yeah, correct.
So which is 3 months away. Originally, when I ordered it, it said September. Now it's November. Now they're giving an update December, which is not their fault. They can't get supplies. So, I mean, it's kind of what's going on in the automotive world right now.
Overall, I just want to put a blanket statement. We are going to be turning attention to Stav's car. We are going to be getting the built motor in here in the next few weeks. Stav's going to rewire. We're going to have a wiring segment for the RS3. For those of you guys that are following, again, Stav and I are both noobs. We're learning. So he may make mistakes along the way. For those of you guys that have any suggestions or want to say anything or give any tips and tricks, please
Only
do.
negative comments, please. I appreciate it. I like the negative comment. Like, hey, man, Stevie Wonder
Gives us fuel.
Yeah, it gives me fuel.
No, guys, but all joking aside, again, this has been a hell of a journey, just getting it firing and running. People said online, well, I hate to say people, like a handful of like 2 or 3 people, maybe 5 in the industry said this car would never run, never fire. It would be 5 years before anything happens. And again, you guys saw the last videos in the last few months, our exhaust work, our driving, our milestones with the car of getting it firing and driving.
If anyone, listen, there's no bigger hater on this car than me. And this car does run. I've driven it to work multiple times.
No, it's all CGI that you see in our videos with the exhaust. But that being said, guys, we are super excited on getting the built motor stuff kicked off and going and installed. We're going to be doing a series on just the piston and rod install. We're going to be doing a series on the crank setup, the clutch and flywheel from DCT clutch.
Ooh,
we're going to be
DCT.
doing an episode on the install on that. We're super excited for the upgraded VR6 stuff.
Let's talk about the world's greatest shirts. One of our new designs.
This is Stav's new stuff. So actually, this is all Stav. Stav did this along with our buddy Joe from New York that moved out to California, Bone Joe. And Stav ended up having this concept. And look, the sleeving.
Our faces.
Stav's face, in case he forgets what he looks like.
Yep,
and then mine on the left. And then you got the VR6 that is greater than the 5-cylinder.
And some people might say 6 is greater than 5. If you want to argue, it's math.
It's the Ultimate Trolls shirt. When we were there at SoCal Year, a lot of people came up. They were laughing. They really enjoyed the joke. We love busting chops. We did get a lot of hate for changing the plates on the RS3 to LOL 5-cylinder. Again, it's just to poke fun and have a good time. Don't take it personal. It's a joke. Don't take it too hard, okay? Just try to enjoy, laugh, and have some fun. That being said, these shirts stand the test of time in the next 2 weeks. We're going to start looking at making some new hats as well. Stav's going to be working on a new design since he seems to have the gift of
My
design.
list of things the next couple of weeks is long.
So we may offer these shirts on our website. In fact, speaking of the website, shit, there's so much to update in this video. I haven't updated that thing in 9 or 10 months, man. There's still 5-cylinder parts that we no longer carry, that we did one run with, that we no longer support.
If you keep slacking, we're going to fire you from Malaka MotorSports.
So huge updates coming to our website, huge updates coming to the YouTube, more videos. Another video is going to be coming out at the end of this week. So we're looking to do 2 videos a week for the next few months, knocking this car out here in the next few weeks, getting it running, driving, making power, launching, being violent, going fast, and of course, pissing off the world, one 5-cylinder owner at a time. That being said, guys, really appreciate you guys coming to check us out. We're back. We're going to be posting a lot more content. We hope you guys stick around. If you have anything, questions, comments, anything, put it in the comments below. For those of you guys that are just finding this channel for the first time, hit that like, hit that subscribe if you like what you see and what's going on. If you guys are looking to do whatever, hit us up on DM, hit us up on email with any questions or comments you may have as well. But other than that,
that's it.
I'm George.
I'm Stav.
Thank you again for watching. This is Malaka MotorSports, and we'll see you on the next video Friday morning.